Do we have a clearer sense at this point of the strategic geopolitical ambitions of President Xi and whether or not indeed those ambitions are being revised in light of some of the international pushback that we're seeing?
Well, Xi Jinping certainly has vast international ambitions, right? That's something we've seen throughout his entire tenure, and that's something that they will talk about, and he will talk about especially at the 70th anniversary, what he's done to grow China's global posture, what he's done to improve China's relationship with its regional neighbors, and what China's economy has done on the global scale. There's a lot to be proud of, but there is the pushback, and that's something that they will not reckon with likely on the anniversary, but something that they're reckoning with in the news, with the EU, with the US, and even with some of its neighbors in the region. So that is something that will be top of mind, even if it's not top of the papers in China.
And the list of challenges is long. The pushback they're receiving in terms of what's happening in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, of course, Taiwan, the South China Sea. What would you say is the number one challenge, at least in the short to medium term, for President Xi and his team?
The short to medium term likely is Hong Kong. I doubt Beijing thought that the conflict would go on as long as it has, and they've shown a lot of patience and put a lot of faith in Carrie Lam, right? They pretty much allowed her to deal with this the way that she wants to deal with it. But as this pressure continues on her, on Hong Kong, as the U.S. looks more into it, maybe passes its Hong Kong Act in Congress, that makes China more concerned, right? What can we do? What are we not doing here? That's what they'll be looking at in the next couple of months. And then down the line, on January 11, you have the Taiwan election. And for Beijing, that's going to be very, very important. And the impact that Hong Kong is having on Taiwan right now is big, right? Tsai Ing-wen's approval ratings have gone up massively in the past 2 weeks because she's responded so forcefully in support of Hong Kong. So those are the two big issues that Beijing's really going to be keeping an eye on.
The other thing I'd like to ask you, Kelsey, in light of Howdy Modi, of course. Narendra Modi, he was in Texas, of course. We all saw the pictures and how chummy they were, of course, with the U.S. president here. With India flexing its muscles, is that your sort of underestimated sort of risk, key strategic, I guess, regional rivalry that China will start to focus on a little bit more in the coming decades?
Yeah, in a normal year, I might say yes. The issue for China right now is that it really does not want to rock the boat in Asia because it's dealing with the U.S. So you've seen this in its response to India's decision on Kashmir, where China essentially let it go, right? It was not in the news. They have not canceled their many regional dialogues. Xi and Modi are likely to still meet in October. They've put on a brave face and they've soldiered forward. So we will continue to see China kind of allowing India a little bit of leeway there in the next couple of years, or at least as long as it takes to deal with the U.S. trade issue. In maybe the longer term, 5 years or so, that's when you could see things sort of settle. Maybe China then takes a firmer hand toward India and some of these perceived slights, and that's where it becomes more of a risk.
And Kelsey, going back to Hong Kong now, you mentioned about this human rights legislation that's been going around in Congress. How much traction is there on that? I mean, we've heard these things been brought up in Washington before, and then they just kind of get sidelined. And it ultimately comes down to what President Trump says, too, and whether he wants to tie this whole Hong Kong issue to the trade war.
Yeah, absolutely. There hasn't been quite as much support for it from President Trump, but there's a lot of support in Congress. And the House has basically said that they think they have the ability to pass it even if Trump vetoes it. So we don't think it's likely Trump would veto it because of the optics at this point, but we don't think he's looking on it too positively because it just sends the wrong message at a time when his trade negotiations are going on. But there's also mixed feelings in Hong Kong, right? Half of the protesters like the bill because it shows U.S. interest in the Hong Kong situation, and then half of the protesters don't like the bill because it requires a yearly review of Hong Kong's special status, and that's something that Hong Kong does not want to be taken away. So it's pretty controversial, but in Congress, it's fairly popular.